I stood frozen in the cramped bathroom stall of a mountain gas station, my phone pressed against my ear, listening to my wife plan my death. "We'll leave him at the next rest stop," Chloe whispered, her voice nearly drowned out by the rumble of the ancient hand dryer outside the women's restroom. "The forecast says the temperature will drop below freezing tonight. No phone, no wallet, no witnesses. They'll think he wandered off." "And the insurance?" Stephanie's voice was barely audible. "5 million, my wife responded. "Split 4 ways minus expenses. More than enough to start fresh." My hands trembled as I pressed record on my phone. 5 years of marriage and I never truly knew the woman I shared my bed with. The revelation struck me like an avalanche, sudden, cold, and crushing. Just 3 days ago, we'd arrived at this idyllic Colorado mountain resort to celebrate our 5th anniversary. Chloe had suggested the trip as a chance to fix things after what she called a rough patch. I'd been hopeful, even excited. Then her friends showed up. Surprise. Stephanie had announced at our cabin door, flanked by Ella and Lauren. "Girls' weekend +1." The disappointment must have shown on my face because Chloe squeezed my arm painfully. "Isn't it wonderful, Mike?" she prompted, her nails digging into my bicep. "They drove all this way to celebrate with us." I nodded and smiled, playing the good husband. For 3 days I endured their inside jokes and subtle jabs. Every time I suggested an activity for just Chloe and me, her friends would miraculously appear with a better idea. When I finally confronted her last night, she'd accused me of being controlling. "You never let me have friends," she'd snapped, though I could name every bridesmaid at our wedding, every colleague she'd ever invited for dinner. Now, standing in this grimy gas station bathroom, everything clicked into terrible focus. The way she'd insisted on making my coffee every morning for the past month. The sudden interest in hiking dangerous trails. The new life insurance policy she'd convinced me to sign. What if he doesn't just wander off? Lauren's voice now concerned. What if someone picks him up? In the middle of nowhere? Stephanie scoffed. Besides, she's been putting small doses in his food for weeks. He's been dizzy, disoriented. The police will assume he got confused and succumbed to the elements. I pressed my fist against my mouth to stifle a gasp. The unexplained nausea, the persistent headaches I'd attributed to stress. My wife had been poisoning me. Their voices faded as they moved away from the door. I stood in that stall for what felt like hours, my mind racing. If I confronted them 4-against-1, who would believe me? A confused husband making wild accusations against his concerned wife and her friends? When I finally emerged from the bathroom, I left my old life behind in that stall. I took only my phone, wallet, and the clothes on my back. As I stepped into the harsh mountain sunlight, I saw our rental car pulling away, Chloe at the wheel, not even bothering to look back. "They left you, didn't they?" I turned to find an elderly man watching me from the doorway of the gas station. His weathered face spoke of decades in these mountains, his eyes sharp despite his age. "Seems that way," I replied, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. "Name's Eric," he said, extending a calloused hand. "Had a partner leave me high and dry in these mountains once. Difference is, I knew she was planning it." He studied my face. "You look like a man who just discovered the world ain't what he thought it was." I nodded, unable to form words. "You could call the police," he suggested, jerking his thumb toward the ancient payphone attached to the building. I considered it briefly. Call the police, report my wife for, what? Abandonment? They'd find me before any investigation could begin. I'd be the confused, paranoid husband, and Chloe the concerned wife who'd simply gone for help when I wandered off. "You got another option," Eric said slowly, reading my hesitation. "Sometimes when folks mean you harm, the best thing to do is let them think they succeeded." I looked up at him, intrigued. "I've got a satellite phone inside. But instead of calling your wife, maybe call your bank first." He spat a stream of tobacco juice into the dust. "Never underestimate the advantage of being thought dead by those who wish you were." For the first time since hearing my wife plotting my murder, I felt something other than shock, a spark of something like hope or perhaps determination. I said carefully, "I'd like to make several calls." Eric's satellite phone felt heavy in my hand. I stared at the keypad, my finger hovering over the familiar digits of Chloe's number. Old habits die hard. For 5 years she'd been my first call when anything went wrong. "Think carefully, son," Eric cautioned, leaning against the counter of his small office behind the gas station. "Whoever you call first sets your path forward." He was right. I punched in a different number, holding my breath as it connected. "Colorado State Police, what's your emergency?" I hesitated only a second. "I need to report suspicious behavior regarding my wife." I have reason to believe she's attempting to file a missing person report, possibly as part of an insurance fraud scheme. The officer sounded skeptical but took my information. After hanging up, I immediately placed a second call to our insurance company. The representative sounded much more interested when I mentioned potential fraud involving a $5 million policy. "Sir, I'm going to transfer you to our Special Investigations Unit," she said, her tone shifting from customer service pleasantness to something more serious. 20 minutes later, I had a case number and instructions to gather evidence without alerting my wife. The investigator's final words echoed in my mind: "Mr. Carter, if what you're saying is true, do not, under any circumstances, make contact with your wife or her associates." Eric watched me silently as I handed back his phone. "Thank you," I said, suddenly aware of how bizarre my situation was. "I can pay you for the calls." He waved me off. "What's your plan now?" "I need to get to a town, withdraw cash before Chloe can freeze our accounts, and—" I trailed off, the enormity of my situation crashing down on me. I had no car, no change of clothes, nothing but my wallet, phone, and the growing certainty that my wife wanted me dead. "I head into Grand Junction every Thursday for supplies," Eric said, glancing at his watch. "Was planning to go tomorrow, but I can make an exception." His ancient pickup truck smelled of tobacco and engine oil. As we descended from the mountains, cell service gradually returned, and my phone erupted with notifications. 6 missed calls from Chloe. 4 from Stephanie. Text messages expressing increasingly worried sentiments. "Mike, where are you? We came back and you were gone. Babe, please call me. I'm getting scared. Mike, if you're doing this to punish me for bringing the girls, it's not funny." The final message chilled me. "We've called the ranger station. They're sending someone to look for you. Please be okay." They were already setting the stage, establishing a timeline of concern that would make them appear innocent when my body was eventually found. I turned off my phone and slipped it into my jacket pocket. I needed it as evidence, but I couldn't risk them tracking my location. In Grand Junction, Eric dropped me at a bank branch. I withdrew $8,000, nearly everything from our joint savings. The teller gave me a curious look but processed the transaction without comment. Next, I purchased a prepaid phone, basic necessities, and found a modest motel room under a different name. That evening, I sat on the edge of the bed in my anonymous room, watching local news coverage on a fuzzy television screen. Colorado authorities are searching for Michael Carter, a 34-year-old tourist from Chicago who disappeared near Crested Butte earlier today. His wife reported him missing after he vanished from a gas station rest stop. Search and rescue teams have been deployed but face challenging conditions as temperatures drop overnight. The camera cut to Chloe, her eyes red-rimmed, clutching a tissue. "He's been acting strangely lately," she sobbed. "Confused, forgetful. I'm so worried he might have wandered off the path." Standing supportively behind her were Stephanie, Ella, and Lauren, all wearing expressions of appropriate concern. I recognized their performance for what it was, having seen their true faces at the gas station. I muted the television and opened my laptop. With shaking hands, I searched for a private investigator in the area. Among the results, one name stood out: Ryan Blackwood, former police detective, specializing in insurance fraud and missing persons cases. I sent him an email with minimal details, requesting a meeting. His response came within minutes. "Tomorrow, 9 a.m., Westside Diner. Sit at the counter, order coffee. I'll find you." As darkness fell over Grand Junction, I made 2 final decisions. First, I powered on my old phone just long enough to record a video, time-stamped proof of my current condition, documenting my clear mental state and the reasons for my disappearance. Second, I decided that Michael Carter, the trusting husband who believed in the woman he married, was indeed dead. He had died at that gas station. The man who emerged would need to be someone else entirely, someone who could outwit 4 women intent on his destruction. I fell asleep to the sound of rain against the window, dreaming of Chloe's face when she realized her perfect crime had backfired. Tomorrow would be the first day of my new life. The Westside Diner smelled of coffee and bacon grease. I sat at the counter as instructed, nursing my second cup of coffee when someone slid onto the stool beside me. "Order the pancakes," said the man without looking at me. "Bertha makes the best in town." Ryan Blackwood looked nothing like I'd expected. No weathered trench coat or hard-boiled demeanor, just a fit man in his 40s wearing a Denver Broncos cap and reading glasses perched on his nose. He could have been anyone's neighbor or the coach of a little league team. "Your email was interesting," he continued, adding cream to his coffee. "Not every day someone wants me to prove they're alive while their wife tries to prove they're dead." I pushed a manila envelope toward him. Everything I have so far. The recorded conversation, bank statements, medical records showing unexplained symptoms consistent with low-dose poisoning. Ryan flipped through the contents, his expression unchanging. When he finished, he sipped his coffee and asked simply, "Why not just confront her? Go to the police with this." 4 witnesses against 1, I replied. All claiming I've been mentally unstable. Plus, no concrete proof of intent, just a recorded conversation that could be explained away as a misunderstanding. He nodded slowly. You need more. I need irrefutable evidence. I need to know who else is involved. And I need to protect myself while I get it. We spent the next hour outlining a strategy. Ryan would conduct surveillance on Chloe and her friends, documenting their activities and conversations. I would establish a new temporary identity and stay off the radar. You'll need income that can't be traced back to you, he pointed out. Cash jobs only. Which is how, 3 days later, I found myself washing dishes at Jackie's Place, a local diner 5 blocks from my motel. The owner, Jacqueline Renault, was a 40-something woman with sleeve tattoos and a no-nonsense attitude. She hired me on the spot when I claimed to be a down-on-his-luck divorce looking to rebuild. I don't care about your past, she said, tossing me an apron. But if you steal from me or show up drunk, you're gone. Otherwise, dishwashing starts at 4, prep cook if you prove yourself. The work was mindless but oddly therapeutic. No one looked twice at a dishwasher, which gave me space to think while earning enough to extend my motel stay. Each night, I'd return to my room and check the secure email account Ryan used to update me. 1 week into my disappearance, the updates took a disturbing turn. Subject spent 3 hours at Chicago National Bank with N. Winters, attorney. According to my source, they're filing preliminary paperwork for death in absentia. Normally requires 7 years, but Winters has connections. My wife wasn't wasting any time. Subject's S.L. and wife visited Westfield Mall. Notable purchases. Subject S purchased Louis Vuitton bag, $2,100. Wife purchased Tiffany bracelet, $4,500. Subject L purchased Louboutin heels, $950. All paid with American Express ending 7290. My credit card. They were already celebrating, spending my money while search teams combed the mountains for my body. The thought made me physically ill. 2 weeks in, Ryan sent photos. Chloe leaving an upscale restaurant, arm in arm with a man I recognized as her boss, James Harper. The timestamp showed it was taken just 3 days after my disappearance. No tears, no distress, just my wife smiling up at another man while wearing the diamonds I'd given her for our anniversary. I forwarded the photos to my insurance company contact with shaking hands. That evening, as I scrubbed pots at Jackie's, a customer at the counter spilled her coffee, splashing my uniform. I looked up, annoyed, to find a woman about my age with auburn hair hastily mopping up the spill. "I'm so sorry," she said, genuinely mortified. I knocked it with my law books. Indeed, several heavy textbooks were spread across the counter, one showing a chapter heading about insurance litigation. "Law student?" I asked, trying to sound casual as I wiped coffee from my apron. "3rd year at Western Colorado. Specializing in insurance and corporate fraud." She extended her hand. "Sienna." "Mike," I replied automatically, then froze. I'd been introducing myself as John for weeks. She raised an eyebrow but said nothing about my slip. "Let me buy you a replacement coffee," I offered, desperate to change the subject. When my shift ended, I found her still at the counter, surrounded by highlighted notes. We talked casually for 20 minutes. She needed a break from studying, and I craved normal human interaction after weeks of isolation. As she gathered her books to leave, she hesitated. "You know, there's something familiar about you." My heart stopped. "Have you ever waited tables at the Capitol Grill in Denver? I swear the waiter there had your exact eyes." I forced a laugh. "Never been to Denver, actually." She shrugged, smiling. "Well, nice to meet you anyway, Mike, not John." As I watched her leave, I felt something I hadn't experienced since before the gas station. Connection to another human being. It was both comforting and terrifying. In my new reality, connections were liabilities. Trust was a luxury I could no longer afford. Later that night, Ryan's email contained something unexpected. A video clip of Chloe speaking to a local news reporter, tears streaming down her face. "I just want answers," she sobbed. "If anyone has seen Mike, please come forward. I need to know what happened to my husband." I watched her performance with detached fascination. The woman I'd married was a stranger, and a terrifyingly good liar. "We have enough," Ryan said, spreading photos across my motel room table. 3 months had passed since the gas station, and my small room had transformed into an evidence board worthy of a crime procedural. Bank statements showed Chloe withdrawing large sums. Phone records revealed constant communication between her and James Harper dating back 8 months before my disappearance. Credit card statements documented lavish spending that had begun within days of my vanishing. "Look at this," Ryan pointed to a printout. "She applied for 3 new credit cards in your name after you disappeared. Maxed them all out buying furniture for a new condo in Harper's building." I picked up a transcript of a recorded conversation between Stephanie and her boyfriend, captured at a restaurant where Ryan had planted a device nearby. They discussed the situation with remarkable candor. "Chloe says once they declare him dead, the insurance pays out immediately," Stephanie had said. $5 million. Can you imagine? And all because some mountain hiker got lost. My jaw tightened. It's still circumstantial. They could claim they genuinely believed I was dead. "This isn't," Ryan countered, sliding a final document toward me. It was a toxicology report from hair samples I'd provided upon our first meeting. The results showed elevated levels of arsenic consistent with low-dose poisoning over several weeks. "But they'll say it came from somewhere else," I argued. "Water contamination, seafood. Combined with everything else?" Ryan shook his head. "It's enough to get the police involved." I'd been avoiding this moment. Going to the authorities meant exposing myself, ending the persona I'd carefully constructed. John Wilson, dishwasher and aspiring cook at Jackie's place, would disappear, and Michael Carter would return to face a media circus. "I need to think about it," I said finally. Ryan gathered his materials. "Don't wait too long. Your wife filed the final paperwork yesterday. Once a judge declares you legally dead, she collects everything. After he left, I wandered to Jackie's even though it was my day off. The diner had become my sanctuary, a place where nobody knew or cared about my past. "You look like hell," Jackie commented as I slid onto a counter stool. "Rough night," I admitted. She pushed a plate of eggs and toast toward me. "Then tell me what's eating you." I'd given Jackie a simplified version of my story, a messy divorce starting over. She never pried for details, which made her easy to talk to. "Life decisions," I said vaguely. "Trying to figure out when to face something I've been avoiding." Jackie wiped down the counter. "My ex-husband used to say, the only way past it is through it. Course he said that right before walking out on me and Tommy, so take it with a grain of salt." The bell above the door jingled and Sienna walked in, snow melting in her auburn hair. Over the past months she'd become a regular, often bringing her textbooks during slow periods. Our conversations had evolved from casual pleasantries to deeper discussions about law, ethics, and occasionally hypothetical fraud cases that weren't so hypothetical to me. "The usual?" Jackie called to her. "Please," Sienna replied, shaking off her coat. She noticed me and smiled. "Hey Mike. Day off." Her use of my real name still startled me sometimes. After my slip that first day, I decided to keep it, one less lie to maintain. Jackie disappeared into the kitchen and Sienna lowered her voice. "I've been thinking about that hypothetical case you mentioned. The spouse trying to collect life insurance." My heart rate quickened. "Oh. If your friend has evidence of foul play, they should go to the FBI, not local police." She pulled out a business card. "My professor worked for them. Insurance fraud across state lines is federal jurisdiction." I took the card, our fingers brushing briefly. "I'll let him know. Your friend might also want to check the policy for an incontestability clause," she continued. "Most policies have a 2-year window where the company can investigate fraud." The kitchen door swung open as Jackie returned with Sienna's coffee. She looked between us with knowing eyes. "You two solving world problems again?" Before either of us could respond, my burner phone rang. Ryan never called unless it was urgent. "Excuse me," I said, stepping outside to answer. Ryan's voice was tense. "We have a problem. Ella's gone." "What do you mean gone?" "She missed work 3 days straight. Neighbor says she packed a bag Sunday night. Left in a hurry." Ella, the quietest of Chloe's friends, had always seemed the most uncomfortable with their scheme. Had she run? Or had something happened to her? "That's not all," Ryan continued. "I've been monitoring your wife's communications. She received a call yesterday from a burner phone. The conversation was brief, but she seemed agitated afterward. Immediately called Stephanie and Lauren for an emergency meeting. A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the winter air. You think Ella's having second thoughts? Maybe. Or maybe they're tying up loose ends. Either way, we need to move quickly." The judge is reviewing your wife's petition on Friday. I glanced back through the window at Sienna, deep in conversation with Jackie. For a moment, I envisioned a different life. One where I was simply Mike, a man interested in a law student who liked terrible diner coffee. Not a presumed dead husband building a case against his murderous wife. I'll call you back, I told Ryan, decision made. It was time to stop hiding and start fighting. You're hiding something and I want to know what it is, Jackie said, arms crossed as she cornered me in the kitchen after closing time. 4 months into my employment, I'd graduated from dishwasher to prep cook and occasionally handled the grill during rush hours. I don't know what you... Save it, she interrupted. You get mysterious phone calls. That private investigator guy visits you during breaks. And yesterday, you nearly took off someone's hand when they touched your phone. I sighed, setting down the knife I'd been using to slice vegetables for tomorrow's soup. Jackie had given me more than a job. She'd provided something close to friendship in my isolated existence. It's complicated, I offered. Life usually is. She leaned against the counter. Look, I'm not asking for your deepest secrets. But if you're in trouble, maybe I can help. Something in her expression, the genuine concern, broke down my defenses. I told her a version of the truth. My wife had tried to harm me, I disappeared to protect myself while gathering evidence, and now I was preparing to resurface. Jackie let out a low whistle when I finished. That's some movie of the week stuff right there. I understand if you want me gone, I said quietly. I've basically been lying to you for months. To my surprise, she laughed. You think you're the first person to come through here running from something? Half my staff has a story they'd rather not tell. Her expression softened. Besides, you make the best French toast in Colorado. I'd be stupid to fire you. That night, she offered me the unused apartment above the diner. It's nothing fancy, but it's more permanent than that motel. Plus, the commute's shorter. The small space became my first real home since the gas station. I hung the evidence photos on the wall, no longer needing to take them down when housekeeping came through. I bought a decent mattress and a bookshelf. Small steps toward normalcy. On my day off, I took a risk and visited the Grand Junction Public Library. Using a computer there, I checked my old email account and was stunned to find dozens of messages from former colleagues and friends, all expressing concern about my disappearance. Many mentioned calling Chloe to offer support, and her responses painted me as increasingly unstable before I vanished. Mike had been acting strange for weeks, talking about people following him, skipping his medication. Medication I'd never been prescribed. A mental health history that didn't exist. She'd been laying groundwork long before our anniversary trip. I forwarded the emails to Ryan before logging out, then wandered to the cooking section where I found an old Italian cookbook. Something about the faded recipes reminded me of my grandmother, who taught me to cook as a child. On impulse, I checked it out using my new library card, the first official document bearing my real name in months. That evening, I tried one of the pasta recipes, modifying it slightly. The familiar process of cooking, measuring, chopping, tasting, settled my mind. I began jotting down recipe notes in a small notebook, adding my own variations. Something smells amazing, Sienna's voice called from the diner stairwell. She'd taken to visiting occasionally, ostensibly to discuss legal theories, though our conversations typically ranged far beyond law. Pasta alla Norsina, I replied, opening the door. Family recipe. Well, family recipe plus my improvements. She laughed, holding up a bottle of wine. I thought you might need this. Ryan told me about the hearing tomorrow. I froze. Ryan spoke to you? Don't panic, she said, setting down the wine. I've known who you are since the second week. That coffee spill wasn't entirely accidental. My mind raced. You were investigating me? Insurance fraud is my specialty, remember? Ryan reached out after seeing me talk to you at the diner. He needed someone with legal knowledge who could get close without raising suspicions. I felt a complicated mix of betrayal and relief. So all this, our friendship, was just part of the investigation? Her expression softened. At first, maybe. But not for a long time now. She stepped closer. I wouldn't be here with Grocery Store Merlot if this was just work, Mike. The tension between us had been building for weeks, both of us careful to maintain professional boundaries. But now, standing in my tiny kitchen with the truth finally exposed, those reasons seemed less important. Before I could respond, my phone rang, Ryan again. They found Ella, he said without preamble. She's alive. Relief flooded through me. Where? Motel outside Denver. She reached out to me through the tip line we set up. Says she wants to turn witness. Is she safe? For now. I've got someone watching her room. His voice lowered. She says they suspect she's having doubts. Chloe threatened her last week. I glanced at Sienna, who was pretending not to eavesdrop while examining my cookbook. What changed? Why is she willing to talk now? According to her, Chloe's been spending the insurance money before it arrives. Bought property in her mother's name, set up offshore accounts. Ella got scared when she overheard Chloe and Harper discussing what would happen if the situation with her became a problem. They threatened to kill her too, I translated. Essentially. She's willing to testify about everything, the planning, the poison, all of it. With her statement and our evidence, we've got enough for the FBI. As I hung up, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: hope. Not just for justice, but for a future beyond this limbo I'd been living in. Sienna handed me a glass of wine. Good news? The best, I replied. For the first time, I think I might actually win. To victory then, she said, raising her glass. And to whatever comes after. The motel room door swung open, revealing a woman I barely recognized. Ella's sleek blonde hair had been chopped into a ragged pixie cut and dyed brown. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and she'd lost at least 15 pounds since I'd last seen her. Mike, she whispered, her voice breaking. I didn't think you were really alive. Ryan stood watch outside while I entered the sparse room. Empty fast food containers and energy drink cans littered every surface. Ella had been living like a fugitive, because she was one. How long have you been running? I asked, taking a seat at the small table by the window. 3 weeks. She wrapped her arms around herself. Ever since I overheard Chloe talking to James about making me disappear if I became a liability. Her laugh was brittle. Funny thing is, I was the one who introduced them. Back when she first started at the firm. I tried to keep my expression neutral, though the confirmation of their affair still stung. Tell me everything, Ella. From the beginning. For the next hour she talked. The affair had begun 8 months before our anniversary trip. The murder plot had started as a hypothetical conversation during a girls' night, fueled by wine and Chloe's complaints about our marriage. It was just talk at first, Ella insisted, tears streaming down her face. Then Stephanie mentioned the insurance policy she'd seen at your house. $5 million. Suddenly it wasn't hypothetical anymore. Stephanie had researched untraceable poisons. Lauren had suggested the mountain trip, knowing the remote location would make an accident more believable. Chloe had been the one to execute the plan, adding small doses of arsenic to my coffee for weeks. I never thought she'd actually go through with it, Ella said. I swear, Mike, I thought it was just dark fantasy talk. By the time I realized how serious they were, we were already in Colorado. Yet you went along with it. You left me at that gas station. Her gaze dropped. I was afraid of what they'd do if I objected. Especially Stephanie, she scares me. Always has. She pulled out her phone, showing me text messages from Chloe and Stephanie that had escalated from concern to veiled threats over the past weeks. We need to talk about your cold feet. Remember, we're all in this together. If one goes down, we all do. James knows people who can make problems go away. Don't become a problem, sweetie. I'll testify, Ella said finally. I'll tell them everything. I just need protection. As I left her room, Ryan was on the phone with his FBI contact. We're bringing her in tomorrow morning. 8 a.m. I nodded, but anxiety churned in my stomach. Something felt wrong. Have someone watch her door tonight. Don't let her make any calls. That evening, I found myself unable to concentrate on anything. I paced my small apartment, checking my phone every few minutes. Sienna had gone to Denver for a meeting with the prosecutor, promising to call with updates. Just after midnight, my phone rang. She's gone, Ryan said without preamble. What? How? The agent watching her stepped away to get coffee from the lobby. When he came back, her room was empty. Back window jimmied open. My mind raced. Did she run or did they find her? Hard to say. Her purse and ID are still there, but her phone's gone. I hung up and immediately called Sienna, who answered on the first ring. I just heard, she said. The FBI is searching, but... Check hospitals, I interrupted. If Stephanie or Chloe's boyfriend has connections to organized crime, they might have taken her somewhere too. I couldn't finish the sentence. The thought of Ella being harmed because she'd finally decided to do the right thing was unbearable. I'll make some calls, Sienna promised. In the meantime, you need to be careful. If they found Ella, they might know I'm alive too, I finished. The realization hit like ice water. 4 months, I'd been hiding in plain sight, protected by Chloe's certainty of my death. If that illusion was shattered, I was exposed. Don't go back to your apartment, Sienna warned. It's the first place they'll look. I grabbed my emergency bag, always packed, always ready, and headed downstairs. Jackie was closing the diner, wiping down the last of the tables. You look like you've seen a ghost, she observed. I need to disappear for a few days, I said quickly. The people I told you about, they might know where I am. Understanding dawned in her eyes. Without hesitation, she tossed me a set of keys. My brother's hunting cabin. About 30 miles west, off Highway 50. No one will look for you there. The relief of having somewhere to go was overwhelming. Jackie, just come back in one piece, she interrupted. Tommy needs help with his math homework next week, and you're the only one who can explain fractions to that boy. Her casual mention of her son, of normal life continuing, nearly undid me. In the chaos of the past months, Jackie and Tommy had become the closest thing to family I had. As I slipped out the back door, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The message contained only an image, a photograph of me entering Ella's motel room that morning. Below it, a single line of text. I always knew you were a survivor, Michael. Just like me. Let's talk. Breath caught in my throat, I stared at the message. After all these months of hiding and gathering evidence, the hunted had just become the hunter. But I couldn't tell if the message was from a friend or foe, or which would be more dangerous. Jackie's brother apparently believed comfort was optional. The hunting cabin consisted of one room with a wood stove, a sagging couch, and a narrow cot. No running water, just a pump outside and an outhouse 20 paces from the back door. Still, it had one crucial feature: isolation. The nearest neighbor was 3 miles away. I spent the first day in nervous vigilance, jumping at every snapping twig. By evening, exhaustion overtook fear and I collapsed onto the cot without removing my shoes. The vibration of my phone woke me. Ryan's message was brief: found Ella. Hospital in Montrose. Alive but injured. FBI has her now. Relief washed over me, followed by grim resolve. I called Ryan immediately. What happened? I demanded when he answered. Someone ran her off the road on her way to meet with the feds, he explained. Good Samaritan found her and called an ambulance. She has a concussion and a broken arm, but she's talking. Who did it? She claims it was James Harper. Says he pulled alongside her car, forced her into a guardrail, then approached her vehicle. She managed to pepper spray him and escape into the woods before passing out from her injuries. An image formed in my mind, Ella stumbling through dark woods, injured and terrified, while Chloe's boyfriend hunted her. My stomach turned. The FBI has guards on her room, Ryan continued. She's giving her full statement today. It's happening, Mike. We're close. Close wasn't enough. I needed to know Ella was truly safe, that her testimony would be properly recorded and preserved. If anything happened to her before the case went to court, I need to see her, I decided. Bad idea, Ryan countered. We don't know who else might be watching the hospital. I'll be careful. But I need to hear from her directly what happened. What I didn't say, I needed to look in her eyes and know she was telling the truth this time. The hospital in Montrose was a 40-minute drive from the cabin. I borrowed Jackie's brother's ancient truck, parked 2 blocks away, and approached through a service entrance I'd located on the hospital's website. A baseball cap and surgical mask, common enough in a hospital, provided minimal disguise. Ella's room was on the 3rd floor with an FBI agent posted outside. This presented a problem until a nurse wheeling a medication cart approached. I fell into step behind her, helping to hold a door, looking like I belonged. When she turned left, I continued straight, walking directly toward Ella's room with purpose. The agent stopped me. Sir, this room is restricted. I pulled out my phone, showing him a text from Ryan with his FBI contact's name. Special Agent Mendez sent me to speak with the witness. I have information about the case. The agent hesitated, then made a quick call. To my surprise, he nodded and stepped aside. 10 minutes. Ella lay in the hospital bed, her right arm in a cast, bruises blossoming across her face. Her eyes widened when she saw me. Mike, she whispered. You shouldn't be here. I had to make sure you were okay. I moved closer. And that you're really going through with this. She looked away. I am. I've already given them most of my statement. They're bringing a prosecutor in this afternoon to go over everything again. Tell me what happened on the road. Her account matched what Ryan had told me. James Harper had found her, attempted to force her off the road, then tried to reach her through her broken window. The pepper spray had been her saving grace. There's something else you should know, she said, her voice dropping. Something I didn't tell the FBI yet. She glanced at the door, then continued, Chloe has another policy on you. A private one through a company in the Caymans. Another $5 million. My blood ran cold. How do you know this? Stephanie bragged about it when she was drunk. Said Chloe was smarter than all of us, had a backup plan the authorities would never trace. The pieces clicked together. $10 million. An offshore account. A boyfriend with criminal connections. This was bigger than I'd imagined. There's more, Ella continued. They found something at your house. Something that scared them. What? A hidden camera. In your office. Chloe thinks you might have been recording things before you disappeared. I hadn't installed any camera. But the possibility that there might be additional evidence out there, evidence I hadn't known about, changed everything. When did they find this? Last week. They've been tearing the house apart looking for what might be on it. She gripped my hand suddenly. Mike, if there really is a recording. It could corroborate your testimony, I finished. Her eyes met mine. Or it could show I was more involved than I've admitted. The door opened before I could respond. A nurse entered, followed by two men in suits. My time was up. I squeezed Ella's hand. Tell the complete truth. It's your only chance now. As I slipped out, I heard one of the men say, Ms. Wilson, I'm Deputy U.S. Attorney Graves. We'd like to discuss witness protection options. In the hospital parking lot, I called Sienna. Ella's talking. They're offering her witness protection. That's good, she replied, her voice tight. But we may have another problem. Someone broke into my apartment last night. My heart dropped. Are you okay? I wasn't home. But they went through all my files. The only thing missing is the folder with my notes on your case. Where are you now? At a hotel. Ryan arranged it. She paused. Mike, they know about me. About us working together. First Ella, now Sienna. Everyone connected to me was becoming a target. Stay there, I instructed. I'm coming to you. As I hung up, a text message appeared on my screen, from Chloe's number. I always knew you were too smart to die in those mountains, Michael. It's time we talked. You have something I want. I have something you need. Tomorrow noon at the beginning. Where it all started. The gas station. She wanted to meet where she'd left me to die. After months of hiding, planning, and gathering evidence, my wife was finally ready to face me, now that she knew I was alive and a threat to her freedom. The trap was set. The question was, who was trapping whom? Absolutely not, Ryan said, pacing Sienna's hotel room. Meeting Chloe alone is suicide. I agree, Sienna added. She's desperate. She knows we're closing in. I sat on the edge of the bed, Chloe's message glowing on my phone screen. That's exactly why this might be our best opportunity. She's making mistakes. Getting sloppy. The FBI had been briefed about Chloe's text. They wanted to set up a sting operation. Wire me for sound, position agents around the gas station, catch her incriminating herself. A solid plan except for one detail. She'll spot federal agents from a mile away, I argued. One wrong move and she disappears with the money, or worse, send someone else to finish what she started. So what's your counter-proposal? Ryan asked skeptically. I laid out my alternative. I would meet Chloe as requested, but Ryan would be nearby recording everything. No federal presence to spook her, just the two of us, the way it began. And what's stopping her from shooting you on sight? Sienna demanded. Curiosity, I replied. She thinks I have something she wants. Probably whatever was on that camera Ella mentioned. After hours of debate, we reached a compromise. I would meet Chloe wearing a hidden microphone. Ryan would position himself within visual range but remain unseen. FBI agents would be stationed 5 miles out in each direction, ready to move in when signaled. The next morning, I drove alone to the gas station where my life had unraveled 6 months earlier. The irony wasn't lost on me, returning to the place where I'd been left to die, now willingly walking into potential danger. Eric was gone. A new owner had renovated the once dingy store, replacing the ancient fuel pumps with modern ones. Only the mountains remained unchanged, indifferent to human dramas played out in their shadow. I arrived 30 minutes early, parking behind the building where my rental car had been that fateful day. Time enough to check in with Ryan, positioned on a ridge with binoculars and a directional microphone. Testing, I murmured, adjusting my jacket to conceal the wire. Clear as day, Ryan's voice confirmed through my earpiece. FBI units are in position. At precisely noon, a sleek black Audi pulled into the lot. Chloe stepped out alone, wearing oversized sunglasses and a camel-colored coat I didn't recognize. New purchase, courtesy of my presumed death. My heart hammered as she approached, her familiar gait stirring complicated emotions. 6 months ago, I would have run to her, concerned about why she looked so strained. Now, I recognized the tightness in her smile for what it was, calculation, not affection. "Michael," she said, stopping several feet away. "You look good for a dead man." "Sorry to disappoint," I replied evenly. She removed her sunglasses, studying me. "You have no idea how shocked I was when James showed me that security footage from Ella's motel. At first, I thought it was some look-alike, someone with an unfortunate resemblance. But no, it was you. Alive and well. Unlike Ella after your boyfriend ran her off the road." Something flashed in her eyes, surprise perhaps that I knew about the attack. She recovered quickly. "James has a temper. I would have handled Ella more diplomatically. The way you handled me? With arsenic in my coffee?" She laughed, the sound brittle in the mountain air. "You always were smarter than I gave you credit for. When did you figure it out?" "At this very gas station. I overheard your conversation with Stephanie about the insurance money. And instead of confronting me, you disappeared. Created this whole new life." She took a step closer. "I'm almost impressed. What do you want, Chloe? Your text mentioned a trade." She reached into her coat pocket, producing a small flash drive. "Footage from a camera found in your office. Very interesting viewing. Especially the part where you discuss our finances with your brother last year." She twirled the device between her fingers. "You mentioned transferring funds to an account I don't know about. For emergency purposes." I kept my expression neutral. The conversation she referenced had been about setting up a surprise anniversary trip. The money transferred to a travel agent's account. "What do you think that account contained?" I asked. "Based on the amounts discussed? At least $2 million. Her eyes narrowed. "Money that should legally be mine now. And in exchange? I want you to disappear. Permanently this time. Sign a document renouncing any claim to the insurance money, admitting you staged your own disappearance, and agreeing never to contact me again. Or this footage goes to the police showing you conspired to hide assets during our marriage, a felony in Colorado. You'd be arrested and I'd still get everything through the courts." She smiled thinly. "Either way, I win." For a moment, I almost admired her confidence, her absolute certainty that she held all the cards. "There's a problem with your plan," I said quietly. "And what's that?" "I'm not alone." I gestured to my chest where the wire was hidden. "This entire conversation is being recorded. The FBI has Ella's testimony. They have evidence of the poisoning. And now they have you on tape attempting to blackmail me." Her composure slipped for the first time. "You're bluffing. Federal agents are positioned 5 miles north and south of here. Just out of sight, but close enough to respond within minutes." As if on cue, distant sirens began to wail. Ryan's signal to the FBI teams. Chloe's face hardened. "You could have had everything: money, freedom, a clean slate. Instead you chose revenge." "Not revenge," I corrected her. "Justice." She lunged forward suddenly, her hand emerging from her pocket holding not the flash drive but a small pistol. Before she could aim, I twisted sideways, knocking her arm upward. The gun discharged with a deafening crack, the bullet disappearing into the clear blue sky. Ryan appeared from nowhere, tackling Chloe to the ground. The gun skittered across the pavement as she screamed obscenities, her perfect facade finally shattering completely. Within minutes, FBI vehicles converged on the gas station. I watched silently as agents handcuffed my wife and placed her in the back of an unmarked car. The flash drive she'd brandished lay forgotten on the ground. I picked it up, knowing it contained nothing that could harm me but everything that would help convict her. "It's over," Sienna said, appearing at my side. She'd been waiting with the nearest FBI team. But as I watched Chloe's car pull away, I knew she was wrong. It wasn't over. After 6 months of hiding, of building evidence and planning, justice was finally beginning. The hard part, reclaiming my life, my identity, my future, still lay ahead. 1 year after Chloe's arrest, I stood in the kitchen of Second Breath, carefully plating the house specialty, a wild mushroom risotto with truffle oil. The small restaurant had opened 3 months ago, transforming a neglected storefront in downtown Grand Junction into what the local paper had recently called the most exciting culinary destination in western Colorado. "Table 12 is getting impatient," Jackie called, pushing through the swinging doors. After 2 decades of running her diner, she'd seamlessly transitioned to managing the front of house at our joint venture. 2 minutes, I promised, adding the final garnish. The restaurant had been Jackie's idea. After the trial ended, when I found myself at a crossroads, she'd pointed out that my temporary job as a cook had become something more, a passion that had sustained me through the darkest period of my life. "You've got the talent," she'd said. "I've got the business experience. And we both have money to invest." My investment had come from an unexpected source. While Chloe's criminal conviction had voided her claim to the life insurance, the investigation had uncovered the offshore account she'd established. After a lengthy legal battle, the court had awarded me half of the funds, more than enough to start a new life. The trial itself had dominated national headlines for weeks. The Colorado conspiracy and gas station death plot had become the kind of sensational true crime story that fascinated the public. I declined all interview requests, but that hadn't stopped 3 unauthorized books and a documentary from being produced. Chloe had maintained her innocence until the evidence became overwhelming. The toxicology reports, Ella's testimony, the recorded confession at the gas station, combined with evidence that she'd attempted to expedite the declaration of my death through judicial connections, had sealed her fate. When finally backed into a corner, she turned on her accomplices, offering testimony against James Harper in exchange for a reduced sentence. The strategy had failed spectacularly. The jury had found her guilty on all counts: attempted murder, conspiracy, insurance fraud, and obstruction of justice. 25 years, no possibility of parole for at least 15. Stephanie had received 15 years for her role as the primary planner. James Harper, with his criminal history, had been sentenced to 20. Lauren had received 5 years probation for her cooperation. Ella, after testifying against everyone, had entered witness protection and disappeared to begin a new life under a different name. I finished plating the risotto and rang the bell. "Order up." Through the kitchen window, I watched as Jackie delivered the dishes to an older couple celebrating an anniversary. The woman's face lit up at the presentation, and I felt the familiar satisfaction that had become my new normal, the simple pleasure of creating something that brought joy to others. "Looks like we've got another happy customer," said a voice behind me. I turned to find Sienna leaning against the doorframe, still wearing the tailored suit from her day in court. After completing law school, she'd accepted a position with the district attorney's office, specializing in fraud cases. "How was your hearing?" I asked, wiping my hands on a towel. "We got the indictment," she replied with a smile. "All 3 counts." I pulled her into a hug, careful not to get sauce on her suit. "Congratulations, counselor." Our relationship had developed slowly after the trial. Both of us had been cautious, me still processing the betrayal of my marriage, her concerned about the ethics of becoming involved with someone who had been part of a case she'd worked on. But some connections prove stronger than hesitations. "I have another piece of news," she said, her expression turning serious. "I got a call from the U.S. Attorney's Office today. Chloe is filing another appeal." I sighed, turning back to my workstation to begin prepping the next order. "Of course she is. That's what, the 3rd one? 4th. They've all been denied so far, and this one will be too." She stepped closer, resting a hand on my shoulder. "But there's something else. Stephanie is being released next week. Good behavior." My knife paused over the cutting board. Stephanie had been the architect of the plot, the one who'd researched poisons and convinced Chloe that murder was the answer. "She served less than a third of her sentence," I said quietly. "I know. The system isn't perfect." Sienna squeezed my shoulder. "Her parole conditions require her to stay in Ohio with her sister. She won't be anywhere near Colorado." I nodded, resuming my chopping with deliberate focus. "It doesn't matter. That part of my life is over." And I meant it. The restaurant, my friendship with Jackie and her son Tommy, my relationship with Sienna, these were my reality now. The past occasionally reached out with bony fingers, but its grip was weaker each time. Later that evening, after the last customers had departed and the kitchen was clean, Sienna and I walked along Main Street toward the small house we'd purchased together 6 months ago. The night air carried the first hint of autumn, and storefront windows glowed warmly against the darkening sky. "I've been thinking," she said as we paused at the intersection. "Maybe it's time to write your story. The real story, not the sensationalized version from the documentaries." I considered this as we waited for the light to change. For so long I'd defined myself in opposition to what had happened, the man who survived his wife's murder plot. Perhaps it was time to reframe that narrative. "Maybe," I conceded. "But not yet." "Why not?" I pointed toward our restaurant, its sign still illuminated against the night sky. "Second Breath" glowed in soft blue letters. "Because I'm still writing the good part," I told her. and I'd like to see how it ends. 5 years after Chloe's conviction, I stood on the back deck of our mountain home, watching my daughter Haley chase butterflies across the lawn. At 3 years old, she was a whirlwind of energy and curiosity, with Sienna's auburn hair and my stubborn chin. "Daddy? Look," she called, carefully cupping something in her tiny hands. I knelt down as she approached, her face serious with the responsibility of her discovery. "What did you find, sweet pea?" She opened her palms to reveal a small blue butterfly, its wings gently pulsing. "It's hurt," she whispered. I examined the creature carefully. "Not hurt, just resting. Sometimes even butterflies need to catch their breath." She nodded solemnly, accepting this wisdom without question. "Can we help it?" "The best help is to let it go where it wants to be," I explained. Together, we walked to a patch of wildflowers and watched as the butterfly fluttered away, seemingly revived by its brief rest. Sienna appeared in the doorway, phone in hand. "Tommy just called. The dinner crowd is already lining up at the original location." The success of Second Breath had exceeded our wildest expectations. What began as a single restaurant had expanded to 3 locations across western Colorado. Jackie still ran the front of house at the original spot, while Tommy, now in college, managed the books for all 3 during summer breaks. Sienna had opened her own law firm 2 years ago, specializing in helping victims of domestic abuse navigate the legal system. Her experience with my case had revealed gaps in how the justice system handled complex domestic situations, particularly those involving financial control and emotional manipulation. "Your book signing is at 7, she reminded me, joining us on the lawn. "Should I bring Haley, or is Jackie's sister still available to babysit?" My cookbook, part recipes, part memoir, had been published 3 months ago. Second Breath, Recipes for Rebuilding, had spent 6 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list, much to my amazement. The publisher was already discussing a follow-up focused more specifically on the culinary techniques I'd developed. "Lisa confirmed she can watch her," I replied. "I don't think a crowded bookstore is the right place for a 3-year-old past bedtime." As Sienna led Haley inside for lunch, I checked my phone and found an email from Ella, or rather, from the woman who had once been Ella. She'd changed her name and moved to Oregon after the trial, but we maintained sporadic contact through an anonymous email account set up by the Witness Protection Program. Her message was brief as always: "Saw your book in the window of my local bookstore. So proud of how far you've come. I'm doing well too, engaged to be married next spring. Some ghosts still haunt me, but they grow fainter with time." I smiled as I typed a quick response, congratulating her and sharing a few highlights of our life without revealing specific details. These exchanges served as occasional reminders of the journey we'd both traveled. Inside, I found Sienna making sandwiches while Haley chatted animatedly about her butterfly rescue. "Mail came," Sienna said, nodding toward a small stack on the counter. "There's something from the correctional facility." My stomach tightened as I examined the envelope. Chloe had been denied parole twice already, but she persisted in filing appeals and making claims about her innocence. I'd stopped reading her letters years ago, having nothing to gain from her manipulations. "I'll deal with it later," I decided, tucking the envelope into a drawer. After lunch, I drove into town to check on preparations at the original restaurant before my signing event. The head chef, a talented young woman I'd hired 3 years ago, had everything under control, allowing me to focus more on expanding the business and spending time with my family. As I walked through the dining room, a familiar face caught my attention. An elderly woman sat alone at a corner table, her silver hair elegantly styled, her posture rigid despite her age. She watched me intently as I approached. "You're him," she said simply. "The man who defeated my daughter." Chloe's mother. I'd never met her during my marriage. Chloe had claimed they were estranged, but I recognized her from photos I'd seen during the trial. "I'm not sure I'd phrase it that way," I replied carefully, sliding into the seat across from her. "She was always difficult," the woman said, studying me. "Even as a child. Nothing was ever her fault. Nothing was ever enough." She sighed. "I failed her somehow. Maybe if her father had stayed." "We all make our own choices," I said gently. "Chloe made hers." She nodded, reaching into her purse to withdraw an envelope. "She asked me to give you this. Said it was important that you read it yourself, not through lawyers." I hesitated, eyeing the letter with suspicion. "It's not what you think," the older woman said. "She's dying. Cancer. 6 months, maybe less." The news hit me oddly, not with satisfaction or grief but with a hollow sense of waste. So many lives damaged, so much time lost, and for what? She wrote it all down, her mother continued. A full confession. The complete truth, she says. Her first truly honest act. She pushed the envelope toward me. You don't have to forgive her. Just acknowledge that in the end she tried to do one right thing. I accepted the letter without promising to read it. After she left, I placed it inside my jacket pocket, unsure what I would ultimately do with Chloe's final communication. That evening, after the successful book signing, I returned home to find Sienna on the deck with a glass of wine, enjoying the sunset. Haley was asleep, the house quiet except for the distant sound of wind through the pines. Good event? She asked as I joined her. Full house. Sold every copy they had. She smiled, noticing the still-sealed envelope I held. Chloe's letter? I nodded, turning it over in my hands. Her mother brought it. Apparently, Chloe's dying. This is supposed to be her full confession, her attempt at, I don't know, atonement maybe. Are you going to read it? I considered the question as I watched the sun sink behind the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. After a moment, I stood and approached the fire pit we often used on cool evenings. With a decisive motion, I tossed the unopened letter onto the embers. Sometimes the best reply is to live well, I said, returning to embrace my wife. That's the only revenge that matters. As darkness settled over our home, I thought about the winding path that had led me here, from betrayal and near death to purpose and family. I had lost a life but found a better one. Through the kitchen of a roadside diner, I had discovered not just survival but rebirth. Chloe's final words, whatever they might have been, were now ash and smoke, carried away on the mountain breeze. Her story was ending. Mine was still being written, one day, one meal, one moment of joy at a time.